Stand at a busy intersection at 8 in the morning and watch what happens. 100 people are hurtling toward one another inside 2-ton machines. Any one of them could, at any moment, simply not stop. There is nothing physical preventing it. There is only a painted line on the asphalt and a colored light hanging on a wire, and the astonishing unspoken agreement that when the light turns red, everyone will press the brake. They do. Almost always they do. The light changes, the metal river halts, and a stranger walks across in front of 100 idling engines, without once considering that she is doing something remarkable. Now widen the frame. That woman crossing the street is wearing cotton grown in one country, spun in another, and sewn in a third. In her bag is a coffee that passed through the hands of a picker, a roaster, a shipper, a barista, perhaps 40 people, none of whom she will ever meet. Not one of whom she trusted personally, and all of whom did their part anyway. Under her feet run pipes carrying clean water that somebody she has never met decided to treat and pressurize this morning. Above her, aircraft full of strangers are being guided down through cloud by a voice in a headset. None of these people are her family. Most of them do not share her language, her beliefs, or her interests. Many of them, if she met them, would irritate her. And yet the whole vast contraption holds together, day after day, well enough that she can think about her meeting instead of her survival. No other animal on Earth does anything like this. Chimpanzees are brilliantly social creatures, and we will spend the next chapter with them. But a chimpanzee community of more than about 150 individuals tends to fracture into hostile halves. Wolves hunt in coordinated packs of 8 or 10. Ants and honeybees cooperate by the millions, but they are near copies of one another, sisters running the same instructions, and no ant has ever disagreed with another ant about what the colony ought to do next. Humans cooperate at the scale of ants while remaining as different from each other as any two creatures alive. Millions of strangers with clashing beliefs and competing wants somehow queue, pay taxes, obey speed limits, honor contracts, and stop at red lights. Not perfectly. Not everywhere. But often enough that we forget to be amazed. The machinery that makes this possible has a name. The rules, the laws, the courts, the customs, the arguments, the votes, the compromises, the quiet threats behind them, all of it together, the whole improvised apparatus by which people who do not agree manage to live in the same place anyway. We call it politics. The first person to look at all this and try to explain it scientifically was, by trade, a biologist. Around 345 BCE, on the Greek island of Lesbos, a man in his late 30s spent his days waiting in a warm lagoon. He pulled up cuttlefish and cut them open. He counted the chambers of a sea urchin's mouth. He watched fish spawn and cataloged which ones laid eggs and which bore live young. He got things wrong. He thought the brain was a cooling organ for the blood, but he got a staggering amount right, so much so that when Charles Darwin read him 22 centuries later, he said his own scientific heroes were schoolboys by comparison. The man in the lagoon was Aristotle. A decade after Lesbos, having tutored a Macedonian prince who would become Alexander the Great, Aristotle founded a school in Athens called the Lyceum. And there, he turned the same patient, collecting, comparing eye he had turned on mollusks onto something far stranger: governments. He sent his students out across the Greek world with an assignment. Go to the city-states, the independent, quarrelsome towns scattered across the Aegean and Sicily and the coast of Asia Minor, and write down how each one is actually governed. Who holds office? How are they chosen? Who may speak in the assembly? What happens when a rich man and a poor man bring the same complaint? They came back with 158 constitutions. It was the first great research project in the history of political science. Not a philosopher dreaming up the perfect state in his study, but a team of investigators gathering specimens in the field. Aristotle laid them side by side the way he had laid out his fish and began sorting. Which arrangements lasted? Which collapsed? What did the stable ones have in common? Nearly all of that collection is gone, burned, or rotted, or simply forgotten in the long centuries afterward. But in the late 1800s, a bundle of papyrus surfaced in Egypt, And when scholars unrolled it, they found themselves reading a lost account of how the Athenians governed themselves, one of the missing 158, surfacing after 2,000 years like a coelacanth hauled up in a net. It was in this period that Aristotle wrote the sentence he is still quoted for: "The human being is by nature a political animal." The phrase has been so worn down by use that we now hear it as a wisecrack, as though he meant that people are naturally scheming, or that everyone secretly enjoys an election. He meant something much larger, and to see it you have to know one Greek word. Polis. It meant the city, but not merely the buildings. It meant the whole shared enterprise of a town governing itself. The assembly on the hill, the law courts, the festivals, the walls, the arguments in the marketplace, the obligation to show up when the city called. Everything we still call politics, from polis, comes from that word. So political animal meant something closer to the creature that lives in cities. The animal whose natural habitat is a community of rules. Aristotle knew perfectly well that bees and ants and cranes live in groups too. That was not his point. His point was about what humans do that the bees cannot, and here he put his finger on something that has never been improved upon. Other animals, he observed, have voices. A dog can communicate pain. A bird can announce danger, and a monkey can scream that a leopard is coming, and every creature in earshot understands. Animals can signal that something is pleasant or that something hurts. Humans have speech, and speech does something categorically different. We can say that an arrangement is unfair. We can argue that a rule ought to be changed, that a punishment was too harsh, that the harvest should be divided differently next year, that a leader has forfeited the right to lead. No bee has ever proposed an amendment. That is the human trick, and everything in this book flows from it. We are the animal that argues about what is just. So what is politics, really? Strip away the campaign ads and the parliaments and the flags, and you find 3 simple conditions that have to be true at the same time. First, people want different things. If everyone wanted exactly the same outcome, there would be nothing to work out. Second, they are stuck with each other. If you can simply walk away, you don't need politics, you need a map. Politics begins where exit ends. Third, a decision has to be made anyway. The river will be dammed or it won't. The land will be divided one way or another. Somebody will be sent to fight, or nobody will. Whenever those 3 things are true, disagreement, interdependence, and the necessity of deciding politics appears. It appears automatically, the way water finds a crack. And there is a 4th element lurking behind the other 3 that we cannot politely leave out: power. Because someone's answer is going to be the one that sticks. And the study of politics is, in the end, the study of how that gets determined and who gets to determine it. Notice how little of this has to do with government. A family deciding where the grandmother will live is doing politics. So is a group of 6 friends choosing a restaurant. A hospital ward rationing beds on a bad night. A village dividing water in a drought. A company where 2 departments want the same budget. Long before there were kings, our ballots, our constitutions, there were people in a circle around a fire, disagreeing about what to do in the morning, and finding some way to settle it, which brings us to the most common thing people say about the subject of this book, which is that they hate it. I'm not interested in politics. I stay out of all that. It is an entirely understandable position, and it is also, in a very old sense, impossible. The Athenians had a word for the person who kept strictly to their own private affairs, and took no part in the life of the city. The word was idiots, a private individual, one who minded his own business rather than the common business. It was not originally a term of abuse, but if you say it aloud you will hear where our modern insult came from. And the drift of that word across 2,000 years tells you what the Greeks came to think of the choice. Their reason was simple, and it has not been refuted. You may decline to participate in politics, but politics does not decline to participate in you. The price of your medicine, the safety of the bridge you drive over, whether your landlord can raise your rent, whether your child's school has a roof that leaks, whether you will be conscripted, whether your savings hold their value, whether the police may enter your home. Every one of these was decided by somebody in a room. And if you were not in the room, you were governed by whoever was. There is no opting out. There is only the choice between the decisions you help make and the decisions that are made for you. There is one last thing to see before we go back to the beginning, and it is the thing that turns this subject from a chore into a wonder. When politics fails, the three conditions do not go away. People still want different things. They are still stuck together. A decision still has to be made. Only now there is no procedure for making it. And what fills that vacuum, every single time, in every century, is force. The dispute gets settled by whoever can hurt the other more. That is the alternative. That is what the whole clumsy apparatus is for. Every parliament, every court, every election, every treaty, every dull committee meeting is a device invented by human beings to answer the question, what shall we do? Without answering it in blood, politics is what we do instead of fighting. Seen that way, the ordinary furniture of public life stops looking boring, and starts looking like something salvaged. Almost every rule you live under is a scar. Somewhere behind it is an old catastrophe, a famine, a massacre, a stolen throne, a king who taxed too far, and somebody afterward saying, let us build something so that this does not happen again. Trial by jury, the separation of powers, the secret ballot, the idea that an army answers to a civilian, the notion that a person may say the government is wrong and go home unharmed, none of these are natural. Each was invented, usually late, usually at enormous cost, usually by people who had just watched the alternative. They can also be lost. That is the other half of the story, and the reason this book has to be told as a history rather than a manual. Nothing in it is permanent. We begin, then, where the problem begins, not with the first parliament or the first king, but with the first groups of humans who had to decide anything at all. We will watch hierarchy appear among our closest relatives, and watch our ancestors spend tens of thousands of years actively beating it back down. We will see the first cities invent kings, taxes, writing, and law, more or less at once and more or less by accident. We will listen to a stonemason's son in Athens ask questions that got him executed, and to a Chinese teacher arguing that a ruler's example matters more than his edicts, and to a Florentine bureaucrat who told the truth about power, and was called wicked for it ever after. We will follow the fight over who counts as one of the people, a fight that has been running for 3,000 years and is not finished. We will watch scholars in the last century try to turn all of this into a genuine science, with data and equations, and find out how far that can be pushed. And we will end by asking what happens to a 5,000-year-old apparatus when some of the deciding starts to be done by machines. It is one question, asked over and over, in mud brick towns and marble assemblies, and glass office buildings, by people who mostly did not know their predecessors had asked it. Who decides? The light turns green. 100 strangers move.